Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy CTB, and we're back with another video. Today, we're going to be going over what I believe to be the top 10 most underrated beatbox sounds. Now, before we get into this list, I would like to at least define what I believe to be what qualifies a sound as underrated. It's not necessarily going to be sounds that are just super unique, they don't get used all that much, and things like that. Those sounds like that are certainly going to be on this list. I believe that what makes a sound underrated is its use. How is it used, and is it something that it could be something that's actually incredibly commonly used, but it's only used in one way, maybe one or two ways, where I believe it could be used in a plethora of ways, and it's not being used to the potential that it could be within the scene. So with number 10, we have the kick drum. Now, some people might be a little surprised seeing something as fundamental to beatboxing as the kick drum on this list, but that's partially why it's so low on the list. The reason why it is on this list is because of how many different ways you can do a kick. And a kick is not just something that is only used in the most simple of beats, it's used in the most complex of beats, and how you can fit different kicks in depending on the situation, and how you can even combine those kicks together to create really unique drum like sets, so to speak. And that also goes for hi-hats as well. So for example, you have of course the classic original OG kick drum, but you also have like the lip roll kick, the dry kick. You even have like the which some people would use as a snare, but you could also use as a kick, actually, depending on its structure and how much you emphasize the pressure on that sound, and whether you have it less airy or more airy and things like that. It can have more of a snare type texture to it, or it can have more of a kick drum type texture to it. The sucker punch is most definitely a kick. The sound I like doing a lot, the uppercut, that one's definitely a kick. There's a lot of different sounds that could be classified as kicks, and I believe that having a comprehensive understanding of what can be used as a kick and using them in ways that people would not necessarily expect, I think is really key for beatboxers' development. And I think that's one of the reasons why the kick is really underrated, because most people only see it as a super fundamental sound that only the most basic of noobs in the scene would actually really focus on and actually train. If you were to look at it through a different light, different perspective, and you see so much more you can actually do with kicks, I think it really definitely deserves to be on this list. Next up, we have tongue bass at number 9. Tongue bass is on this list for one big reason: its ability to be used as a filter. Now, it has other qualities, which also kind of falls in line along with the kick drum, with its versatility. And there's a lot of different ways to do tongue basses, like whether you do it on the teeth, like I like to do it, whether you do it in like the center of the mouth, which is kind of the traditional way to do it, rather you're doing it in more like which was kind of popularized by Tyler W. There's a lot of different ways to use the tongue bass, but I primarily feel like what makes it underrated is its quality to be able to be used as a filter. And what I mean by that is you can filter a sound through that sound to create an entirely different sound. My favorite example of filtering with the tongue bass is hands down using the tongue bass that requires you to use the tip of your tongue on your teeth, your two top front teeth right here, and a falsetto voice. Combining that tongue bass with a falsetto voice to create that's like honestly one of my favorite filters, and I like using it as a lead and as a high, so to speak, to balance out the soundscape of certain things that I'm doing. But it also has really cool qualities to it because you still have that the undertone of that bass from the tongue bass, while you have that overtone of the falsetto. Now, number 8, we have throat kicks. Now, throat kicks are what a lot of people might actually consider to be a relatively popular and maybe even iconic sound. It's been around for a long time in the scene, so it could be confusing to some people as to why I would have it on this list of underrated sounds. Now, the reason why I have it on this list of underrated sounds goes back to what I said at the very beginning of this video, which talks about its usage, or lack thereof. This particular sound in the throat kick is a sound that, despite it being around in the scene for a long time, honestly is not used in a lot of different contexts. You only really will hear this sound used in the context of a house beat or occasionally a drum and bass beat where somebody might go like, you know. But other than those two genres, you don't really hear them being used very much. You don't really hear it being used much in like hip hop beats. You don't really hear it being used much in other electronic stuff, whether it be rhythm, whether it be dubstep. And you don't, it's a sound that could be used for so much more, because what happens when you're using that kick as your main kick in a beat is you're freeing up your mouth for being able to layer other sounds on top of that kick. So when you use that throat kick, you could be layering snares, you could be layering zippers. Now, I'm still doing that in like a house beat tempo, like perfectly showing. That's really how people use it. That was subconscious. You know, I'm using it in a way that is very typical and not really expanding upon the way that it should be used. So that's a note for myself, in all honesty. But it's a sound that, with its capability to be layered with so many different sounds, because it frees up your mouth to do more, it is a sound that I feel like should be on this list, because it could be being used in many more ways than we typically hear it being used. So we have the zipper at number 7, and this particular sound is on this list not just because of some of the other reasons like the other sounds, with it having a lot of versatility, and there's a lot of different ways you can do it, whether it's the normal zipper, whether it's zippers on the side, whether it's the teeth zippers, whether it's the there's a lot of zippers out there. But the biggest reason why the zipper belongs on this list, for my personal opinion, is because of its key component, at the very least for, I would say, roughly half of the zippers that are out there, is that they can be done without the use of air, which means you can be doing inward vocals and or outward vocals at the same time without it compromising the quality of your zipper sound. So a perfect example for that is what I would consider to be like the laser or the chirp zipper, which is a zipper I like to use a lot, especially a few years ago when my style was still developing. That zipper does not require air. So you hear me, I'm doing a few notes outwards, I'm breathing inwards after those notes, and the zipper is still staying somewhat consistent. Same thing goes for the 2H zipper. There's a lot of other zippers. I don't know exactly what the zipper is called, but it's my personal favorite zipper to use, other than the 2H zipper and the chirp zipper, which I guess I can kind of call it a double zipper. So even though I'm holding it out when I do there's actually no air. And it's still staying consistent. It's all just suction. It's all just creating vacuums using different parts of your mouth and the tension between those parts of your mouth to create those higher pitched sounds that are characteristic of zipper sounds. And because it's all suction and pressure that's behind the mechanics of the sound, it allows you to be free for your airways, so you can do inward sounds, you can do outward sounds, and things like that with those on top. Now, for number 6, this is one of the first, I would say, to be really unique sound that's going to be on this list. Very, very few people use this sound, and that sound is the rhino snare. Now, I'm going to do a really, really terrible version of it. That snare is one of the most powerful snares in existence. If done right, it is one of the best sounds to have in your sound set, other than, of course, Beat Rhino being the, person that really pushed that technique into the scene. There's guys like Hunty that really do use that sound very, very well. And it's all about how you use it, because that sound has a very unique texture to it. So other than just the power that sound can generate and its unique texture, the ability to have strong snares, it's one of the least talked about things in beatbox. Having powerful snares, not just clean snares. Because there's a lot of people with clean snares, but they don't have power behind them. They're quite quiet. They don't really resonate. It's a necessity for you to have clean and powerful snares. One of which you might be actually seeing later on in this video. All right, now we're into the top 5. Number 5, we have the hi-hat. Just like the kick drum, some people might be confused to even see this higher up on the list and even something as fundamental as the kick drum, because the hi-hat is on the same level of, beginnerness, so to speak, if that's even a word. And I have a case for why this is in the underrated category. My case for why hi-hats deserve to be in the top 5 most underrated sounds in beatbox is not just because you can do them inwards and outwards, not just because you have multiple different ways you can do a hi-hat. Aside from inwards and outwards, you can use different parts of the mouth, either that be the going back and forth between the inward with your teeth in your tongue, even doing the outward. Those are all hi-hats, just going FT, hi-hat, rolls, and things like that. Those are really fundamental to a lot. Like, the technicality wouldn't be what it is without the flexibility of hi-hats. But it's not just in the fast, really technical, complex beats, but it's even when you're just jamming and you're chilling, the way that you can play with the hi-hat, almost like someone plays with the snare of something, or someone even like doing a run with their voice and things like that. There's so many ways that people will use hi-hats, even like the Footbox G thing. It's just like there's ways that people find here and there to use hi-hats. They may not be the most, mind-blowing, unique sounds. It's a sound that you would expect to get stale and to not really have any advancements because of how basic and fundamental it is. But it's like every year or 2 years, there's some new, cool, weird hi-hat or way to do it, even if it's just like the occasional, like, just airy inward hi-hat, or even with coupling that with the airy or outwards to make it sound a bit more like a realistic hi-hat from a drum set and things like that. And there's just so many ways to affect the texture of a hi-hat that can really help enhance the beat that you're doing. So I really do believe that it deserves to be in the top 5 most underrated sounds. Now, this is where the fun starts. At number 4, we have one of my favorite sounds ever, period, and it is the uppercut. And you can couple this with the sucker punch, but I intentionally wanted to use the uppercut because of a few different reasons, and I'll go into it. The uppercut, which is a sound that not a lot of people may know, is just... It's a sound that I use a lot. There's a few other people that use it, like Grimmix uses it. You see J Watt use it from time to time. Actually, the first time I heard it being used in a beat was actually from J Watt, while he was doing it on accident in the middle of some of his technical beats. And I was jamming with him one day because when he was trying to catch air, his lips would end up inadvertently clapping together and creating a small sound. And I was like, yo, why is no one using that? Because it can be done inwards and outwards, and it can be sped up like you heard me earlier as I chopped it. And when it's done in conjunction with the sucker punch, it's really cool because the sucker punch occupies the lower frequency register a bit more. It's hitting more sub-bass registers, while the uppercut is actually hitting a bit more mid-range. So what you actually end up doing is you end up filling out the frequency range of your drum set when you actually have a sound other than the uppercut and the basic kick, because you now have a kick drum that's occupying the more mid-range of the frequencies that all of your sounds could actually be occupying. And I believe that not only its ability for you to catch air with it, for you to expel air with it, your ability to couple that frequency-wise with other kick drums and things like that, and its ability to be chopped up and done really, really fast, I believe all of those reasons are key reasons for why it does belong in this list. And you could argue that the sucker punch could also be here, because every single way that I just described using the uppercut, you can use the sucker punch. I started using the fast sucker punch a little while ago, like about a year or so ago. Kendo was was using it for a long time. There's a few people that's been doing the faster sucker punches for a year, 2, 3 years plus, and it hasn't really caught on until like relatively recently, but it's still not all that popular. And don't understand why, because you can hit such low notes really quickly when you do the rapid fire sucker punch. But I digress. The uppercut, sucker punch, both deserve to be here, but I decided to use this particular spot for the uppercut to give this sound more attention, more shine, and I believe that it has that extra bit of uniqueness and underratedness to it because it's not as popular as the sucker punch, and because of its use as another way to balance out the frequency variations of your drum set. Number 3 is the outward K. It was gonna be something else. It was gonna be number 2, but we'll get to number 2. I was getting a little ahead of myself. The outward K. When I first did this sound, I didn't understand why it wasn't being used very much. Like, there's a few people that use like the outward K, but that's not the outward K that I'm talking about. Though that outward K is just as effective, maybe not, but it is definitely an effective snare. The outward K that I'm talking about is the. It's easily top 3 loudest snares that I've personally heard live. I've only heard a handful of people do it. It's a sound that is immensely useful for when you're doing a lot of inward sounds, whether it be inward basses. You have maybe a lot of inward drum patterns going on in a tech roll or things like that. And you need a snare, you need something to expel air quickly while still staying on beat and keeping time. And that's one of the best uses for that hard, a bit more airy outward K. You get the air out nice and fast and sharp while still maintaining a clean snare in your sound set, and you're able to keep that going within your beat. And I believe that something that's a lot of people might find to be very simple, I think it's actually very, very key. And you don't need to have the most complex, mind-blowing sound to be in the top 3 for it to be, underrated. It just needs to have uses that maybe it's not being utilized for, or it could have a lot of value that a lot of people may not be knowing and noticing. So I believe the outward K deserves to be in the top 3. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. Top 2. We have, at number 2, the vocal roll. It's your boy, and I feel like the vocal roll is... I could have had it at number 1. Because I don't think there's a sound that can open up as many doors for someone's style as the vocal roll, because of its ability to filter almost anything, rather it's throat bass, rather it's just a strained vocal, normal vocal, inward vocal, inward basses, chest bass, vibration bass. Literally, if it's a sound that travels through your vocal cords, inwards or outwards, it can be vocal rolled. Because the vocal roll, as it's in its pure form, non-vocalized, is just a clicking within this cavity of your mouth. So you don't need to focus on doing anything outwards or inwards. Both can be utilized, and it just passes through that clicking filter, and so you instantly have a different texture on top of any sound that you're doing. It's like a cheat code of a sound. I love it. Number 1, last but certainly not least, in all honesty, the most underrated beatbox sound of all time. It's not even close. The human voice. The human voice is what we push as beatboxers. We are the definition of underrated, because we've gone through eons as a species without developing the human voice to the level that we have as beatboxers have done in just a few decades. And that being aside, just the way that we've actually pushed the human voice as a tool, speaking strictly in a beatboxing sense, when someone is doing a beat and they're able to add a melody on top using their vocal, it just adds a whole nother layer to things. What would beatboxing be if we didn't have melodies. What would beatboxing be if we didn't incorporate singing and things like that? What would beatboxing be if we didn't have the human voice and we just had the beat? We wouldn't be beatbox. We would just be the beat. You need the voice for the box part, that the sound box, because a lot of sounds are just vocal tricks. Turning your tongue a certain way, doing something with your uvula, doing something with your lips or whatever to filter the voice through. Now there's like a lip bass, right? You vocalize and things like that. The ability to vocalize a sound, the fact that that even exists, is the most undervalued thing in beatbox, the human voice. But yet it's what we use the most. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, the top 10 most underrated beatbox sounds. Leave some of your own below. Maybe I missed a few, maybe. I can do another top 10 list if you guys leave enough below. Let me know what you guys might think are your most overrated beatbox sounds as well, because that video will be coming very, very soon. So for now, it's been your boy CTB. I'll catch you guys in the next video.